All right, at 7:01, we'll bring the meeting to order. First thing on the agenda is public participation. Anybody of the public on this call, on this Zoom, could up, raise your hand. If you're not speaking, go ahead and mute your microphone so we don't hear, dogs barking and the like. Seeing no public participation. Your first set of minutes was our April 2nd full committee meeting. Those went out quite a while ago, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to read them. So if there's any questions on those minutes, or I'll entertain a motion to accept.
Motion to accept, Mr. Chairman.
That was
A second.
Jim. Who is second?
Jan.
Jan, thank you, Jan. Any questions or comments, discussion? Seeing none, I will assume everybody on this call votes in favor unless they tell me otherwise. And looking at the list, I see those 3 people are still among the missing. No negatives? Okay, moving forward. Let's go with the potential budget reductions and revised capital article. And Mr. Mayo would like to take capital first. So we will do that. And everybody should have a spreadsheet. I'll bring it up if need be regarding the changes in the capital.
Mr. Chairman, did you want to do the forecasting subcommittee meeting minutes as well to get them out of the way?
Oh, sure.
You don't have to, but.
Well, wait a minute. I'm not sure I have a quorum. Let me think. Pete's on there. Gerard is on there.
Doug?
And Joanne. Oh, we'd have a quorum.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I don't see Pete anymore, and Doug's on, but
Pete's
gone.
gone, huh?
Pete's gone.
Stefan is
All right.
now on.
Oh, yeah, Stefan's on. Hopefully Pete gets back. I mean, we've got two members of the subcommittee, so I'd rather wait, Steve, until we
Okay,
get.
that's fine, no problem.
Hey, you got 3. Me, you, and Joanne.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
That's right. Okay, go ahead.
Pete is rebooting. He got kicked out.
All right. Minutes on the forecasting subcommittee. Do we have a motion?
A motion to accept the minutes, I guess.
Sorry, I
Okay.
forgot to, I forgot to unmute.
Thank you, Joanne.
That's all right. You didn't hear all the snarky comments I had before about you not recognizing me.
I recognized you, Joanne, right in the beginning.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate somebody paying attention.
All right, any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none. Joanne, are you in favor?
I'm in favor.
Doug?
In favor.
I'm in favor. Pete, if you're back on, he's not. I guess that'll be 3-0-0 on the approval of the subcommittee
I got
on
it. Yep.
forecasting. You got that, Steve?
I got it, yep.
All right. Capital article. Should I bring up the spreadsheet?
I think that would be good, yep.
Okay. Share screen, capital, share. I hope everybody can see this.
Yep, I see it.
So before, if I could, Dan, before Frank jumps in, and we can see Frank now, although when the screen is shared, we can't, but you can, Capital Planning Committee did meet. We did talk to them about our dire straits that we're in, and our hopes is that we are in a delay focus instead of a instead of a permanent focus. So, we're not going to know until we get into later times, but we did ask them to look at their capital planning and their budget, and they were really great and came back with a sharpen their pencils and look to defer some things to the next round. So then I'll turn it over to Joe Conway and/or Frank, who are here. They can go through the list.
Oh, okay, I'll start. And, Joe can jump in to answer any questions, everybody. How you doing, everybody? If you can, I don't know if you can see everything, but basically what we did was we took a look at what was originally approved a month or so ago. And with the help of Joe, and Joe had already talked to the department heads to determine basically what could wait and more so what probably wasn't even going to start before the end of the year. So we were trying to look at it from that point of view. If something wasn't even going to be able to begin to use the money by November or December, then or even next spring, then why should we have it on here? So if you can all see that, there's a column on the far right that has the updated what we're recommending now, which totals $1,010,560, which is down from what was originally approved of the in the $2,018,000 range. So it's roughly, we cut it in half, close to half. If anyone feels like you wanted me to go through item by item, so me and Joe can justify what we recommend, that's fine. We'll do that. Otherwise, that's it in a nutshell.
Frank, I had a question
Yes.
on the wireless access points for
For
the
the schools?
school.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's they sold it. We actually had them on with us during our meeting, and they sold it as kind of I don't want to say all or nothing. That's not the right word, but it's something that it's not something that can get done half, and it's not a 50% issue. If they're going to do it this summer, they want to just get it done. And
Right. That's what I was trying to figure out. How does 310 get down to 211?
Oh, don't look at, I'm sorry. Don't look at that number. The 310, I see what you're looking at.
Yeah.
That was the original number back in February. And Joe, if I'm saying something wrong, or if you can clarify what I'm trying to say, when people come to us with numbers, they're usually high. And then over the 4 to 6 weeks that we meet as a capital planning committee, the heads of department and the IT, they come back with more refined numbers.
Okay, so that's all. I just didn't understand how you got, I thought that we were somehow bifurcating that piece of it, and I didn't understand how that would work.
No, let me look. I think the original number, if we look at the spreadsheet that was approved back, it was actually at 217. And when we came back a month later and talked to him to refine this list, he actually got it down to 211.
Okay.
And I forget, Joe, was that because he had some rebates or some discounts or something? But it was actually.
So Joanne, one of the differences, that first number that IT got was basically just a straight up budgetary quote. And then they started the conversation back and forth with them. They actually had some licenses that weren't completely expired. There was some time left on them, and they were able to work out a deal where they got credited for some of the hardware and some of the additional license time, which brought the overall amount needed to do the project down to the 211.
Okay.
So that was a job by the IT department being able to negotiate their way from, what was the budgetary number all the way back down to the 211 that ultimately got approved.
Okay, thank you.
We deal with that sometimes with the capital is people will throw numbers at the DPW at Joe over the winter. And then as it comes closer to our meetings in February and March, they actually get a more refined number and we can make it work.
Great.
So then feeding off of that, my question is on, for example, the alarm and traffic and townwide radios, GIS data. application. The idea here is splitting it between fiscal years.
Yes, he is that the portable radio, the GIS data application development, the 35. Yeah.
Both of them are one half.
Yes, and that was something when we talked to the chief originally. We asked everybody those questions. You know, if we can't grant you, if we don't decide to grant you the full amount, if we gave you half, would you be able to make that work? And he said yes to both of those. So originally we had determined that we would give them both the full amounts, but obviously with our situation and knowing that we could cut it in half, we decided to take advantage of cutting those both in half. Yes. So they can do those in a more of a phased situation. And jumping, I know you asked for the GIS, but as far as the portable radios, basically they're just replenishing their stock of portable radios. So that's not like a an access points thing where they have to do it all at once. Or the portable radios is a different situation. But the GIS data application development is something that could be done in 2 phases. And bringing it back to the wireless access points, he made a very good case that it should be all done at once in the summertime.
I'm gonna follow up with that with a question on the Dolbear HVAC compressor. That one got dropped. Is that something that's it's still working, but just not well?
Yeah, it's something that's work. Joe, why don't you take you want to take that one?
Yep. So that is something that is working. Both the Dolbear and the Woodville School have redundancy in their HVAC systems. And both of them are running on one unit instead of the 2. So that would be to get them back up to having redundancy in there. So their air conditioning for the current time, knock on wood, is operational and fine. This would be to address the redundancy in the system.
Just following that, I noticed that, for example, for DPW flooring, that got dropped. Flooring for the Council on Aging stayed around. Is the rationale there something along the lines of deterioration and one's much worse than the other?
It was one of those things where the senior center at the time was the project that we probably take care of first. Our flooring, we thought that we know we have the bonding that was authorized by town meeting. We have some roof projects and things like that. Depending on where those come in for the rest of that allotment, we might be able to get the flooring done in it. So, we took a step back and let the Council on Aging get their work done. And then, we'll see what happens with our stuff. We might be able to take that on if we get creative on our own, but they had a little bit more of a pressing need than what we did at the time. So our request every year is one of the larger ones. So we didn't want them to not have any needs addressed. So we defaulted to them in that regard.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, so it's Jim. My question really, so the fleet area took a pretty big hit, and then the building area took a pretty big hit. I mean, it looks like there was a good spread, but there's a lot of fleet deferment, it looks like. And then the other thing was the cemetery that could be deferred, Joe, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so it would have been a project that would have helped as far as capacity and cremation grave availability, but it was also one of your larger number capital requests. And at least for the sake of this, when the committee went through it, it's something that we probably wouldn't be able to get into late fall, early spring. So if there is a round 2, then it'll give us a little bit more planning time to plan over the winter, put it out to bid, and then have a springtime construction.
Okay. And then the cruisers, always a tough subject with the prior chief, decreasing cruisers. How about the current chief?
He's a good soldier. He gets it.
Excellent. I'll leave it at that.
I think, are you all set, Jim? I think Doug has his hand raised.
Thanks. I guess the only question is around fleet. Again, I think that we're wise to cut down on some of these things, but also the other question would be that now feels like it would be as good a time as any to, invest in fleet, because you're probably going to get much better deals in the next couple of months on fleet. So I guess my concern there is, not us utilizing the opportunities of right now the COVID crisis. So I guess I'd be inclined to. I was surprised you cut it by half. And I know, Steve, you're looking for money everywhere, but I'm worried that we're going to cut. We're cutting all the things that are easy to cut versus the things that are less comfortable to cut.
All right. Steve, note, I think Gerard is on the line, and
Yep.
Amy has her hand raised. Amy, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the fleet section. I was wondering about the DPW 1330, the 03 Chevy with plow sander that goes from 250 to 55.
Yep.
And I was just wondering about like what would you do with the 55? That just seems like such a big decrease.
So because those vehicles are typically some of the more expensive ones that we acquire, that's actually a finance. So that's a 5-year payment.
Okay.
So it would be 5 years of $55,000 increments.
Okay.
Yeah, Amy, the L/P means lease purchase.
Okay.
Anybody else? Seeing and hearing none. Let's see. I don't figured out how to see any more hands raised. Amy, I guess you're all set then. And I will stop sharing the screen. And if we're all set, I'll say thank you very much, Frank. Appreciate your input and your devotion to the town and capital. Appreciate the effort and everything you and your committee is doing. We owe a lot to you guys. This has been great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Frank.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Mr. Mayo, potential budget reductions.
All right, let's see if I can do this. If I can share my screen, if that's okay.
I say, if you can't, I can.
All right, let's see.
I can see it.
I can see it. Everyone can see this?
Yeah.
Look at that. Okay, slideshow, full screen, maybe? I don't know. All right, well, big deal. I'm gonna do it for. So anyways, if I can, and I'll be quick because a lot of this you guys know because we've been through it before. Really, this is a response to a revenue problem, a revenue shortfall. My philosophy going into this is to maintain as many programs as we can. And this round one, I think, does that. We've spent a lot of time working on a lot of really good programs for the community, and we want to maintain them. Position ourselves for the long run, and that means, making sure that we're not losing anything. It'll take a long time to ratchet up again. I look at on capital and new positions as kind of a timing issue, and we will come out of this. So it's really a timing on some of these issues, and that's why capital's in half, and hopefully we can bring some of that back in the fall. I also looking to make sure that we do have prudent maintenance of our reserves. And the other item in here is that the budget that we're going forward does maintain our bond obligations, and certainly allows us to handle the public safety building, the roads, the high school is a separate matter, and certainly the Greenwood roof. So all that is maintained in here. That doesn't change the budget, and really that's not changing the budget this year anyway. You people certainly know our financial reserve policies, that we want to have, about 8% of operating revenue in free cash, stabilization of about 3%, and our reserve fund, which I think is still at $300,000 this year, and will be next year in the beginning. And I think all in, Kevin, you're still comfortable free cash around 6.5 at the end of the year, thereabouts? The only caveat being the federal reimbursement on any COVID-19 items.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Make sure nothing changed. We have a budget policy. You people have all seen that, and I love that our budget policy, one of the tenets is budgets to be developed in which current revenues equal or exceed current expenditures. So that's kind of been a good mantra we've gone by. So in a pre-COVID-19 world, we did look at our revenues when we were at our tri-board meeting. Real estate taxes, 76.2 million. Local receipts, Chicken Little Kevin and Chicken Little Steve had 7.25. I think FinCom probably having even higher than 8.2 million in the good old days. Gas and light, close to a little over $918,000. State aid, a disappointing 10.9. I think we all felt it might be a little bit higher. New growth is still an area of angst, but that's what we have looking at with the power line, and a lot of that is what happened last year. School Building Authority, that's the last payment on Woodville. We've been pretty much told that's guaranteed, and we were going to use some free cash because Kevin and I have local receipts lower than maybe what we thought was actual. Post-COVID-19 world, things change rapidly. Real estate taxes stay the same, and that's, we've said for years, it's kind of good that we rely on ourselves. Local receipts, ratcheting down to, probably close to 2 million below actuals for last year. I caution that it could be lower, so it's something we need to think about. Wakefield Gas and Light should be the same. State aid, we cut about $1 million out. My numbers and Dan's will be close. I kind of did a little bit more rounded steps. New growth, again, could be lower. SBA will be the same. Free cash, we really don't know what will happen. So when we put those together, we have a projected shortfall of $2 million in revenue. Budget projection at the tri-board meeting, operating budgets were 67, almost 68 million. Fixed costs, capital at 2.1, articles at 3.1, debt service at around 3.1, overlay, 600,000, state and county assessments, cherry seed offsets, which is basically the library, so a total of $100 million in budgets. At the town council, did I go too far here? Okay, maybe I didn't. All right, yes, at the tri-board we did that. Okay, as voted, the budgets we voted pre-COVID-19. And these were actually what the town council voted, and all of these have been presented to the finance committee. Operating budgets came in at 68,233, and that includes the money that I had projected for the police, fire, and supervisor contracts. Fixed costs came in around 21.9. That included health insurance costs as well as retirement costs. Capital was originally 2.18. We just talked about cutting that in half. Articles were a little bit lower, and that was because we were going to go with the road bond, so there was no cash outlay this year. Road bond would be smoothed over the 10 years that we talked about. Debt service, the same. Overlay, the same. State and county assessments and cherry sheet offsets, those are all off of the original cherry sheet that we've gotten, and we have not received an update yet. So that one we got back in January has not changed, although we know it's going to. So looking at the budget total as voted and the total projected revenue, we're looking at about a $2.6 million deficit. So what we were looking at was reduction in operating budgets of 698, the bifurcation of capital expenditures, total reductions of 1.7, Still leaves us with the potential deficit, although we kind of don't know what's going to happen. And actually, today, I attended a Zoom seminar about the possibility, and this is just a possibility, that some of the money under the CARES Act could be, there's some talk in Washington, D.C., and talk at the state level that some of that money could be used for making up for lost revenue. That's the first time I've heard that out there. And a lot of discussion was about that. And what the state did, or what A&F did at the state, was kind of look at each community and say, hey, we have a pool of money coming from the federal government. You can use it for, definitely for COVID-19 expenses. However, we'd like you to go to FEMA first and use the FEMA money and then backfill the excess with this. Or there is the potential that it could be used for revenue shortfalls, and that would come directly to the municipalities. And we'd be looking at about $2.4 million if that comes to fruition. Now, I'm not saying it's going to, I'm not saying it's not. It's the first time I heard that. It was the first kind of good news I got. So I think that we'll be looking at a budget adjustment in November, and part of that will be what is the new growth going to be, and we'll have that figure by then, or in the summer. What is going to happen with state aid? How much of the rainy day fund will the state use for their own, when their own aid coming back to the cities and towns? How much will we have from this direct federal government, and how much will they use in their federal funds where they are there?
Steve?
Yeah.
Quick question for you. Joanne raised her hand.
Okay.
And do you want to take the questions?
Yeah, whatever you
now?
want. Sure, absolutely.
So Joanne, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just a question on the timing of the CARES Act
Yeah.
money. If it were to come in, when do you think we would find out about that?
Well, I tell you, Joanne, I was on that Zoom call today, and that was exactly my question, because they had a chat line on it. For reimbursement of expenditures in this fiscal year, we know we're going to actually be asked tomorrow under the CARES Act to go in for reimbursement of expenditures, which would help us in this fiscal year. The state would like us to go to FEMA first, because FEMA will cover 75% of this under a different pot. So under this pot, they'll give us the other 25%. So it could be a net zero for us this year. Next fiscal year, we would probably know sometime, I'd hope we know in June whether we can use it in the next round. So that's what's being discussed now at the federal level. I don't have a more solid answer than that.
Okay.
What I did also find out at that meeting, and I haven't even talked to Kevin about that, is that basically in an emergency situation, according to Sean Cronin, if there was a delay in any of the FEMA reimbursement for any COVID-19 payments, we would actually kind of look at it like we do a snow and ice overdraft. So it wouldn't affect our free cash, so to speak. We would be getting credited for it. So I thought that was a good thing too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So things I would be looking at in November, not knowing the landscape. We talked about it at our forecasting meeting. Would we reduce OPEB in this fiscal year? Would we use OPEB to cover some of the health insurance? I don't know. There's talk at the state level about exploring extending the funding schedule for retirement. Would we use free cash? And I think we might use a portion of it to smooth things out. Especially in new growth area, because new growth is another one of those timing issues, right? If the whole power line or what we thought would come in doesn't come in this year, it's going to come in next year. There's a timing issue
Steve?
There. Yeah.
I had a conversation with PERAC, and one of the things that was discussed was allowing cities and towns to pay their retirement budget of 2021 equal to the 2020. So no increase. Yeah, obviously that would be passed on and tacked on at the end someplace, either following years or down the road. But there is talk of allowing everybody to pay 21's amount equal to 20's.
Yeah, and that would be a pretty good chunk of change, I think.
Yeah, like $400,000 or so.
Yeah, let me see that. 403,000. That would be great. That'd be wonderful. So these are kind of moving parts that we're looking at, there's talk about it. And unfortunately, we may have to look at reduction of services at some point. So those are things that we are going to have to look at. What do we look like in future years? I just thought I'd throw this in there to talk about it. It all depends on the shape of the rebound. I think the Federal Reserve chairman today said that for those of you people that are V people, that's not going to happen. So, is it going to be a V? Is it going to be a U? Is it going to be a Nike swoosh, which is what I am? Is it going to be a W, which we'd see some up and downs on revenue, or is it going to be an L, which really gives me angst? That means it came down and it just stays flat for a while. So that is a big question. So I mean, I'm still holding that I'm a Nike swoosh kind of guy, but we'll see what happens. So anyways, at Monday night's town council meeting, they did approve a number of budget reductions. Approved reducing the police budget by 38,000. Approved reducing the DPW budget. And on the police budget, that was not laying off any personnel. That was really removing the extra overtime costs for 4th of July and some other events. They also voted to reduce the DPW budget by 110,500. That included not filling an administrative position, which was a new position in the engineering department. Because that position was shared with the water department, water and sewer, that's 21.5 of that. There is a retirement in one of the divisions, I think it's highway, and we would not backfill after that. So someone would move up and take that position, and the new position, which is around 47,000, would not be filled. The construction supervisor position, which we had, Joe had done some great rearranging of the office of that area there. We would not fill that position. Instead, we would put a little bit more on some of the existing people there, and they're kind of doing that job now, so that would probably work out okay in the short run. And removing $10,000 in overtime and details, again, because 4th of July is gone and some of the other events, we won't be, I don't think we'll be covering them either. So that's there. So that adds up to 110,500. Health insurance budget, you may note that we went through that. We felt that we might have and this is under the new policies section. We felt that we might still have a $350,000 surplus at the end of fiscal year 21. So that would be, I trimmed that by 100,000. Again, maybe we might have to look at that in November as well, up or down. Reduce the library budget by 50,000. This would do a lot with pages, pagers, and maybe some part-time and substitute librarians that come in. I think that the library, candidly, will be one of the later things to reopen anyway. At least that's the guidance that we're hearing about. But that everything changes. And I have not been in any of the school department meetings, but I have spoken with Doug. I speak with Doug regularly, and I think they are, and you people can report on that are in those meetings. They are looking towards the $400,000 at this point.
Yeah, Steve, on that, I know that Pete was on this morning's call with their finance subcommittee, and I caught in late because I had a different meeting this morning that interfered. But at the end of their meeting this morning, the two members, Tom and Amy, voted to reduce their budget by $400,000. Is going to make that recommendation to the school committee when they meet the 26th, I think, that Tuesday. So that portion of the school committee is on board with the $400,000 reduction.
Okay, great. Well, I think that certainly helps. So anyways, when you look at the end, for those of you keeping score at home, the town council budgets that will go to you, the items that are adjusted, the police budget will be reduced in the end, and that's all in personal services section. The new budget will be $5,922,655. The DPW budget, again, all in personal services, would be $6,239,368, and the library would be $1.729056, with all of the reductions coming in personal services. I got to say, these are painful cuts to do. I want to thank Kevin and Dan for talking through them with me. I think that it's a good first step. There may be more. I hope there aren't. For the first time on a income side, I was a little bit pleasantly surprised today. If that money, if that federal program does come through, might be a good way to bridge the gap with us. And that's very brief for you guys, but that's where I am.
Okay, thanks, Steve. All right, I'm looking at raised hands, and I'm going to start with Dennis. Go ahead, Dennis.
As far as the town council's budget, this economic director position, I noticed they voted not to eliminate that. What can we do if we decide that we need that 90-odd thousand and take it now and let them wait like everybody else got to wait for future positions?
I am presenting the town council approved budgets, and I said everything I was going to say on that Monday night.
Diplomatic.
But if hardly any people are opened up and doing any work, I can't see a reason to jump the gun and hire this person right away, just like you tried to explain to them, Steve. I sanction your comments and would like to go along with deferring that to the fall.
Well,
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're all set, Dennis?
Yep.
All right, next up is Stefan.
Hey there, I just wanted to find out if there was any details surrounding the proposed budget reduction for the school.
Yeah,
I can speak to that. So,
go ahead.
Stefan, you're looking for specifics as to what makes up 400,000?
Yeah, I was interested in that, and then I guess on top of that, whether or not that has anything to do with, I guess, the negotiated agreements or any outstanding budgetary items that the school is dealing with currently.
Okay, the cuts will not impact any contractual obligations, anything that's under contract. The agreement in the discussions today are everyone is on board with making the $400,000 cuts, and they have a preliminary scenario that they are going to pursue as far as what makes up those cuts. And it primarily has to do incremental FTEs in the original budget. And part of the proposal is to eliminate 3 of those FTEs from the version 2 budget, and that will account for approximately $255,000 of the 400. There are additional miscellaneous expenses, primarily in technology, that they're going to cut, and that'll get them to their 400,000. But I want to qualify all this by saying that Doug and Christine have a couple of different scenarios that are going to get them there, and this is the primary path they're going to take. One of the things that has come up is that there is a larger than originally anticipated kindergarten enrollment for the class of September 2020. And that may warrant an additional kindergarten teacher and para teacher. So that would be 2 FTEs that would be required. They also have 2 positions that as far as having to do with retirement in an open rec, that I just think this group, we need to recognize that they're all committed to the 400,000, and they've got a mindful approach, well thought out approach to get the
Pete, just like with the $6 million man, you're breaking up.
You've got other that's
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, Pete,
I'm done.
Pete, you were breaking up, so we didn't catch about 20% of the ending.
Yeah. If you can hear me now, I was just saying that they're all committed to the 400,000. Everybody's on board with that, and it's just a matter of how they're going to get there, and with providing themselves with the ability to pivot and flexibility to make adjustments as they go. But they're all committed to making the reduction from the 44 million to the 43.6.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Jim?
Thank you. So my questions are, I guess, in general about new hires across the board in all budgets, all FTE new hires. Was there consideration in the analysis to do that, to freeze all new hires?
Yes, we're looking at, we have budgeted positions that aren't hired. So we looked at that, whether they were mainly whether they were new or if they weren't new. You know, for instance, in the DPW budget, you know, we had in the highway division, that wasn't a new position. We're just not going to fill something right now because, you know, someone's retiring and we're going to try to make do for a little while. So that was what we looked at, because I don't want to have to pay. I don't want the last one in is the first one out on, and then we're paying unemployment at the same time. So yes,
No,
that's what we looked at.
Yep. So that's what I was wondering, like, you know, so DPW, you know, took a pretty good hit, but, you know, what about police and fire and any other departments, obviously, other than school in this discussion? Are there other FTEs that were considered, or is that kind of the bulk of it?
You know, I did look at that, but I think right now with what's going on, there are very few. I think police and fire are almost at full strength right now. People are in the academy, so we already spent kind of some money in that anyway. Yeah. So there wasn't any spots to cut there.
All right, and then the library cut, excuse me, 50,000. I looked at the budget spreadsheet. Their budget increase was like 49,000 or something.
Yeah, but that was kind of a that was, yeah. It's like level funding the library just by chance.
Okay. So on a order of magnitude level, they took the biggest cut.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Well, maybe not. I mean, they went from 2% to 0.
Yeah.
And then what was the? I think that was it. Was the personal? Yeah. So capital, personal protection. Yeah, I think those are my questions. The fire department budget had a pretty substantial increase, so I just didn't know if there was any opportunity for cuts in that budget compared to police?
Well, a big part of the fire department budget was we did increase the overtime. We made a concerted effort to do that, so we didn't come back like we have been with the overtime. We really did. We talked about a lot about that, kind of right sizing that position, that budget. So we did increase overtime a lot. I think still overall, I mean, police and fire, police will go up around 2.3, 2.6, 2.7 for the year. Fire will go up around 4. But you're right,
All right, and then,
including the raises.
yeah, I think that's it for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jim. Joanne, you're up. Unmute. Very good.
Coming. Yep, got it. Sorry, slow on the trigger finger. Yeah, I just like to echo Dennis's comments about the economic development position. It just seems egregiously inconsistent and not even practically implementable to hire somebody new at a time when there's a certain level of uncertainty. So the way I broke it down was, in 6 months' time, we're going to know whether this is a U, not a V, probably swoosh, whatever it might be, but we're gonna have more information with which to make better decisions. And I can't imagine how you're going to hire an economic development individual who is going to come in a time when many businesses are just fighting for survival and trying to retool themselves for the next 12, 18, 24 months. And so while I can understand that there's possibly a concern that if it doesn't happen now, it won't happen, logically speaking, if things are worse than expected and there is a reduction in services that we're forced to come to grips with in November, then having hired somebody now or in the interim is just doesn't make sense. And if things work out better than expected, there's more money and we can afford it, then it doesn't seem to me to be a big deal to wait 6 months to know that for sure, and to avoid, it seems like it's avoiding accountability on behalf of the town council, because everyone else came to the table with budget cuts and with you know, an agreement not to hire people, with the exception of police and fire, who, as Steve pointed out, there's a long lead time to bring people on. So those are my comments. And so, you know, at the appropriate time, I would make a motion to add that back into the level of cuts that the finance committee would approve. But
Okay.
don't want to cut off more conversation.
All right, thank you, Joanne. If you're all set, Gerard?
Excuse me, just so this is Jim again. On that subject, we're going to vote on these reductions at some other point, correct?
Yeah, next week.
Very good.
Right, what you'll do is you'll vote for a budget number on each.
Correct. Yeah, an adjusted budget number.
Adjusted budget number.
Right, yeah, we have not voted on any budgets yet, so we'll take up the town council's and the school committee's recommendations, and then we make a decision and we'll vote either yes, no, or something different.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, Gerard.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, the shortest of comments. I just want to align myself with Joanne's analysis and Dennis's on this topic. I think the town council is lining themselves up for a very expensive shoulder shrug. Not many planners or whatnot, and I understand this is a partial replacement for Paul and the whole thing, but this is certainly deferrable. I would support that deferral when the time comes next week. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Gerard. By the way, I'll just chime in that I agree with Dennis, Joanne, and Gerard. Doug, you're up.
So as per usual, being the contrarian in the group, I think you should definitely have the economic development director. And by the way, if in 6 months' time you have to fire some people, you're not firing the economic development director, you're firing a bunch of other people. Look, I think that having someone in place, this is sort of investing while there's sort of blood in the streets versus versus doing it when things are rosy and great. Like maybe the town council didn't do it when things were scary, but frankly, having somebody who is focused on economic development and potentially focused on recruiting other businesses to our town in a time of crisis, it makes sense to me. That's $90,000 I think that could be potentially well spent, assuming they hire the right person. And that, that's the big caveat. Or the question is, and by the way, I'll fully align myself with Dan, Joanne, and sort of everybody else on board here. If we think this is if it's already deigned someone for this position that is like local to the town and that is, that it would be a questionable hire from the outside. But I think that the role and the need is there for us, especially in a time of crisis. So, I'd be more inclined to put 27 kids in the kindergarten than the other way around. But
Not appropriate social distancing.
Yes.
they're kids, they'll be fine.
All right, Doug, you all set? All right, Stefan, your hand's up, unmute.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to actually kind of be the contrarian voice also with Doug. I guess if we find ourselves 6 months from now and things just keep getting worse and worse, and I think it's everybody's understanding now that we don't truly understand how bad it's going to get for a lot of the businesses downtown or in the Wakefield area. But it would be great to have someone that's in that position dedicated to actually help the town heal, essentially, and be the sole person to do it. I'm not sure if there's anyone else in the town or if there's a position that would actually take on that responsibility. But it would behoove us as a community to have someone in that role so that we can heal faster if needed.
Okay, thank you. I think Jim is up next.
Yeah, I have an opinion on this subject, but you don't need it tonight. I was just wondering about getting the job description. Can we get a copy of the job description? I know they rewrote a job description. I listened into the town council meeting this week. So is that possible, Steve? We can get that?
I can do that.
And it's my understanding that our town planner is retiring, so the position's been eliminated, and this is a new position, albeit
It's basically a wash. It's basically
one coming off, one coming on.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I don't see any other hands raised. So might I suggest, Steve, that when you send out revised, or Kevin, when you send out revised budgets, make sure we have two versions, one with the economic development and one without, so it makes it a little easier for us next week. Can you do that?
Kevin can do anything.
We can do that. All right, great.
I will send out that job description to Dan after the meeting.
Okay.
You can forward it, if that's okay.
That's fine. I will do that.
Now Dan's mute.
Oh, am I mute?
Oh, there you go.
No, I'm not muted. I don't think.
Yep.
All right, so you can hear me? Nod your head, Steve.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
Oh, good, good. All right, let's see, where was I?
I think Dennis Hogan has his hand up.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Dennis.
What I just heard is that Paul Rivas is going to be retiring in this current budget. Are they planning to replace him also, or is this going to be a rollover and delete his position?
This would be we would not be hiring a new planner and an economic development director, so it would be a rollover. Yes.
That makes a little bit of difference in my thought, that's all.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else? Not seeing any hands up? Okay. Next up, collective bargaining agreements.
Okay, you ready for me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
All right, I believe that you also have a package on this, or an email that I've sent out to you. Everyone get it?
I sent them the budget memo that you had
Hey, the
provided.
budget memo, yeah, that's what you got. That's what you have. So as the Finance Committee may recall, we have 3 unions that are, whose contracts are expiring on June 30th of 2020. And we were in negotiations, really, before COVID-19 came in, because we kind of start when the new fiscal year, in the fall and everything. But in any event, able to put together agreements for all 3 of the unions. I had carried about $342,000 in our forecast, and actually will come in a little bit lower, around 335. I'll take them, all 3 bargaining units, that being police, and actually police are 2 bargaining units. It's the superior officers and the patrolmen, but the contracts are the same. The terms are the same. The fire union and the supervisors union, which goes through a number of different departments in town hall. All 3 of them are 3 years, so they'd go from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2023. Cost of living increases on all 3 is a split 3% in year 1. So 1.5% on July 1 and 1.5% on January 1. A 3%, straight 3% on July 1st, 2021, and a straight 2.5% on July 1st, 2022. I would note that the first 2 years on this are consistent with other unions that we've dealt with. I always try to keep the cost of living increase the same in every union across the board for the last 10 years. In the police department, the only other item is that there is an increase in specialized training compensation of 0.5% in year 1, another 0.5% in year 2, and 1% in year 3. I think you can think of this as a 3.5% increase overall. Total cost for this contract, again, this is based on what we have now for personnel, because we don't know who's going to retire and what have you, is $140,000 in year 1, $165,000 in year 2, $180,000 in year 3. Percentage increase on the fiscal year 21 personnel section of the police budget over fiscal year 20 is 2.5%. The total budget increase for the police is 2.7%. And I don't know what's going to happen. We will have some retirements, so those numbers will probably be a little bit lower in future years. Fire department there's only 1 union. The cost of living increases are the same. There was emergency training increase compensation of 0.5% in year 1 for first responder, EMT, and paramedic, 0.5% in year 2, and 1% in year 3. The paid detail rates, we do have fire details, will be consistent with the police. There's no budget ramification because this is what private contractors will pay. And sometimes we have a police and we have a fire item. There's a stipend increase for the emergency medical services director and coordinator. And I think in this year, this has been really almost a full-time job for them, and it's about $10,000, and that's included in there. We're also looking to study minimum manning, and this was something that was very, no obligations, just to look at this. Fire department, as am I, have been talking about this, and one of the byproducts of more high rises and what have you is that we have to have, and there might be more calls for service that are going up on a ladder, and it may be, we may need to look at increasing minimum manning for safety. Over the next 3 years, I'm figuring at, and these are costed, I cost by have HR costs by each employee, 135 in year one, 155, 175 in year two. Based on this, the personnel section, personal services section of fire department over 4,000, over fiscal year 20 is 4.1. Total budget increase of the fire is 4.0. It's important to note that we already increased this budget by probably more than 0.5% because we did a big bunch in the overtime. The supervisors and professional, which is the third union, this would also include our elected officials who didn't have raises. A 3-year deal, 1.5% twice in the first year. So split 3% in year two, 2.5% in year three. This is a smaller union, so there is smaller numbers, so the numbers are lower. It's sprinkled around departments. I think you'd see no department increase their personal costs by more than 60%. Most of these people are in DPW, more than 3%. And there are no steps or lanes or tracks increased on any of these things, on any of these contracts. A couple of language items, mainly to tighten up some language around overtime, emergency overtime. That was in the supervisor's contract. But I think these are rather benign, given this day and age. I think they're prudent and sustainable. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Doug has got his hand up. So Doug, go ahead.
Sure, Steve. I was super excited when I heard you talk about minimum manning, and then I heard the obscene notion that we would increase it versus.
I said we're studying it. I don't know what's going to happen, but.
Well, what you said, it's like looking at staying the same or going up, and like that would seem to me to be not an over my dead body sort of thing, but.
Okay.
I'm sure the fire department would say that can be arranged. So yeah, I think it's, I mean, I think the notion of increasing our minimum manning is ridiculous. So that's just sort of where I stand on it.
Okay. Well, I will tell you that we won't even be looking at that. That would be at the end of this. That's at the end of this contract in July of 2022 was when we'd even start. We'd come up with a plan by then. So it's not going to happen now, and it would have to be voted on because we'd have to increase the budget, obviously. So.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Doug. I think Jim, you're up.
So the budgets we had then for, say, police, fire, are we going to get updated budgets to vote on because we haven't voted yet?
No, you will actually, there are 3 articles.
Right.
One for each, maybe actually 4 articles because police are split into 2. So you would actually vote on the contract themselves.
All right, and then if this, the salary increases we talked about earlier in the year, like a 0.76, I could reasonably look at the, the bottom of page 1 for the police and say, the budget that I looked at, I could add 140,000 to it,
Yeah.
and that would round up or take care of that
Exactly.
0.76s and those sorts of things that we contemplated earlier, right?
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, it is. I wouldn't. It's not modest. I don't know what word you use, but it's very consistent. Steve, thanks.
Okay. If you're all set, Jim, I go to Stefan.
I'm also curious about the school contracts. Is this also another collective bargaining agreement?
You will never vote on a school contract, Stefan. That's I have nothing to do with that. That's embedded in their budget somewhere. They do not take their contracts to town meeting.
And will we see an updated budget from the school to take that collective bargaining agreement in?
My understanding is that that was already embedded in their budget.
I thought the original budget that we voted on, or was not voted on, sorry, reviewed was preliminary, and that they hadn't yet finalized the deal.
No, that includes the collective bargaining.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pete.
It has to.
At the time that we heard the budget from Doug and Christine, Stefan is correct. The final collective bargaining agreement had not been settled. It was very close, but the numbers that were incorporated into that budget are consistent with what was settled. So the contract that was settled is reflected in the budget.
Okay. Anybody else? I'm looking for some raised hands. And my wife just raised hers. Anybody else?
Can I just add one thing that we have to keep in mind, Dan?
Yeah, go ahead.
As we go forward with what's going to happen over the next few months, one thing that we don't know at all, and there really isn't a lot of guidance on this at this point, we're waiting for it. What is the educational landscape going to look like? We don't know whether remote learning will continue for a while. We don't know what social distancing is going to look like. We don't know what kind of programs we're going to have to do. So I think we have to keep that in the back of our minds as well. That there are some other things swirling out there. We don't know.
Yeah, when we get to the committee comments, I was going to discuss that and other things that I heard with the Education, Finance, and Facilities Subcommittee regarding exactly that. Give everybody a heads up as to what the school department is worried about. Doug, go ahead. Unmute, Doug.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, I think actually speaking to that, I know the Learn Anywhere was a 2-year program that ends this year. I assume we're pretty psyched that we're probably not ending it, or that we had it in place. But is that an additional budgetary hit if we have to do it?
I think we don't know. Yeah.
Like we weren't going to be allowed to do it, right?
The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education had stated that there were certain segments of the population that were not being serviced in the Learn Anywhere program, whether ours or anybody else's, although I think we had one of the best out there. I don't know if there's a new normal now. They're going to change that. So that's an interesting dynamic because I don't know with the social distancing requirement, I don't know if you can have everybody in a class anymore, but who knows? I don't know.
Well, as long as we've moved on to committee comments.
I think Jan had her hand up too. Jan.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Jan.
I had a question, and it's, I guess as we're talking about the schools and about COVID-19 and what's to come, you know, we get a report every Wednesday that says how many people have, you know, contracted COVID-19. But there isn't really anything, and I guess it's based on town, of how many of those have recovered, so that at least with Wakefield, you can kind of budget of, you know, who has it and who's recovered, so you can focus on those numbers and maybe plan that way a little bit financially to find out, you know, who is infected, you know, how much are we covering from the Board of Health? Is there like an issue with reporting that? Is that like a financial thing?
I will tell you that the I think that Wakefield, including all of the nursing homes and assisted living facilities, probably has 260 positive cumulative cases. I would say half of them are probably in the assisted living areas. But what part of the problem is that we do not know, or I do not know, the addresses, names, what have you. There's a real HIPAA requirement with this. So the police do know and the fire do know the addresses in case they have to go there and they can take extra precautions, but they don't know who in that address has it. I'll tell you that the health department is doing a lot of follow-up and checking on people. Sadly, I would say that 90% of the passings are people that were vulnerable in nursing homes. So this is an evolving item, but you're going to see a lot more contract tracing, a lot more of things like that as we go forward. Hopefully, a lot of those costs will be covered with federal dollars, but it's a moving target.
So is there anything, like, I'm not saying, get the addresses and get the names, just kind of, tick off who recovered so that you can, expand or minimize the number so that people will have a level of comfort, and, maybe that would help out financially with some of the planning.
So I will talk to the health department. I understand what you're saying, is that if we had 260 cases and, 130 of them recovered, we know what the other number is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good point. I think you look at the statewide hospitalizations, that kind of shows you, and you can do some of the math, but I don't have that locally, but I understand what you're saying, Jim. Let me see what I can do.
Okay. All right, so I think we can move to committee comments at this point. I don't see anybody with their hands up. So who up there, anything on the committee comments before I start in on discussions I've had with the schools? Seeing none. I participated in a couple of the meetings, and I got in late this morning. And Pete was in on this morning's discussion with their finance and facilities subcommittee. A couple things. Pete covered the positions and the kindergarten class. Another thing that came out, that so far the retirements at the school is tracking much lower than it normally does. So if they're looking for some savings on turnover, that may not happen. They have been saving a little bit of money on utilities. They have been spending as much money as they possibly can that makes sense for things like cleaning supplies, disinfectants, that sort of stuff for next fall. They're getting in the queue, because right now it is a queue and it's a long queue. Everybody wants to get disinfecting wipes and so forth. So that's going to be a challenge for them. The other thing that's happened is their revolving accounts have taken a major hit, probably to the tune of about $300,000, because they're not getting the revenue on the revolving accounts, and they've had to grant refunds. Quite a bit of money is going out versus coming in. That includes like the Doyle School, athletics, and so forth. What they are also looking at is additional cost going forward in 21 that they weren't planning on. One of which may be masks. It may be a requirement that everybody has to wear masks, and they might be looking at an $80,000 additional cost for that. There's also rumors out there that they may be required to go to a maximum of 10 students per class when they open in the fall. That would be obviously a huge ramification, probably a higher expense, but really tough to institute at 10 kids per class. So that's a real mind scratcher. And the other things that they were looking at is potential increases on sped costs, just because of the stress and so forth on due to this virus, and also additional costs or potential for HR related, where say a teacher has an underlying condition or doesn't feel quite right, they're going to be encouraged to stay home, so they may be spending more time or more money covering for teachers or staff that can't make it. So they do have a lot of challenges, and Pete was right. They realize what they need to do, and they're working very hard to try to accommodate all of that. But they also reiterated the fact that they really don't know. The state has not been very forthcoming with final decisions on the fall. So they are planning and have fingers crossed, and the emphasis is on flexibility. So, and the last point, I might make is the SPED reserve is at about $500,000, I think Kevin had, and they may tap some of that in 2021, but they recognize they can't tap it all. And because once it's gone, we may not, the town may not have the ability to replenish that SPED reserve. So they're going to be very careful about making a request to tap that money. And they recognize that they have it, and they're very fortunate to have it, and they recognize that. Most school districts do not have a SPED reserve like we have here. We're very fortunate to have that. So all those of you who are participating in getting that set up, kudos to you. And that's what I've got to give you guys an update on what I know about the schools. Anything else out there for subcommittees? Any other business? Joe?
Yeah, Dan, it's my understanding you said earlier that we're going to be voting next week. Is that correct?
That is correct. What we're going to do, yeah, articles and budgets.
All right. Well, on the Greenwood roof article, we have in there now an estimate. However, we will have a real number because the bids will be in by May 29th, and the Permanent Building Committee will be meeting on June 2nd. So prior to town meeting, we will have an actual number. So you may want to table that vote and do it before town meeting. That's just unless you want to go with the estimate. I just thought I'd raise that.
Thank you, Joe. Steve, on that score, in the articles, we normally put in a budget amount. Is that, or I mean, a recommended, I can't talk. A recommendation, yeah, recommended amount. So I'm assuming that we're still going to have to print something. So
Yes.
Steve, what's your thought on that?
We would still print a budget book like we have. But on, it has been in the past, we certainly have on some of these items, we could just say Permanent Building Committee to make motion. And we can just give that number later on. We don't have to have that number in the budget book.
Yeah, I would recommend that because we've actually had, as far as the information on the bids we've got, we have 7 pages of contractors that showed an interest in the job. So it is, it could come in hopefully a lot lower than we estimated.
Yeah, it could be a good time to build.
That's right.
Yeah, so, okay, so why don't we just run with the estimate for purposes of the book? And Joe, if you have any, I guess you wouldn't have anything for next week.
No,
so so we'll just vote next week based on the estimate. And then when you actually get up to speak and make the presentation of the article and the motion, we'll just put in the right number or the better number and just tell the audience that, we got a better number and here it is. Pete, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and some of this was covered by Joe's question. I just want to do a quick recap of the sequence of events as far as the meetings over the next couple of weeks leading up to the virtual town meeting. So the town council is going to meet next Monday to approve all of the budgets other than the school budget. Is that correct?
No, town council is done.
Okay, so town council is done. And then you've got the school committee is going to vote next week, as Dan mentioned earlier, on the 43.6 million on the school budget. And then we are going to meet next Thursday night, as was mentioned, to approve or vote on the budgets that we've gone through. And then is there anything else between that period and the town meeting that we need to be aware of?
Actually, just a small correction. I think the school committee meeting is the 26th and our meeting is going to be the 21st.
Okay.
So we would actually be voting the school budget before the school committee formally adopts what their finance subcommittee is going to recommend. But I think other than that, Steve, is there anything else? Do we have anything that you think we're going to have to take up like right before town meeting? I mean, often it's the union contracts, but that's been settled. So to Pete's question, I don't know of anything.
And then we will meet, we'll have a final FinCom meeting in June like we did last year.
At the end of the year, at the end of the month, yes.
Wrap up.
Yeah, because we'll have some reserve fund transfers. Kevin, there is Kevin's hand up, so Kevin's going to address that part. Go ahead, Kevin.
Right, we do have reserve fund transfers that we have to do, but we'll probably do those at the end of June. There is one article on the warrant. It's for supplemental appropriations to town budgets. That's in there in case the concern that if we didn't have enough money in the reserve fund to cover shortfalls that we potentially could have. There's a couple out there right now with this COVID-19. There has been some expenses that have been outlaid that have created deficits, in particular in the miscellaneous town council budget. One of the line items is overdrawn about $75,000 with regards to this COVID-19 expenses. We also have fire salaries that could potentially be up there quite a bit, 80, 100, between 80 and 100,000, I was estimating. And then also the contamination up on, is it Butler Ave? That the lawsuit that we have, that we have legal bills that we have overdrawn. So those potentially we could put in the article to make sure that we do have enough money at the end of the year to cover any reserve fund transfers. So at some point, FinCom will have to vote for the supplemental appropriation article, the amounts for that.
So Kevin, would we be voting next week? Would we know enough to vote next week, or is that going to have to be like right before town meeting, like that night?
We could estimate high, put money in, do supplemental appropriations high into several different budgets. And then if they're not spent, it reverts back to free cash anyways. Because the funding source for the supplemental appropriations would be free cash. So if we over budgeted and we didn't spend it all, it comes back to free cash anyways. So it's a half a dozen of one, whichever way you'd rather do it. If you want to vote an amount next week, I can give you a rough estimate, and I'd estimate high, or we can wait to, like when you're going to hear the Greenwood roof number, before town meeting to come up with a number, we could do it that way too.
Well, I think for the Greenwood, we would vote whatever the estimate is, and then the motion would be different. Because I'm just thinking about if we do town meeting at Lanigan Field, for example, it may be difficult for this group to gather someplace convenient to have a pre-town meeting. Sure. That might be a bit tricky. So if we can wrap up as much as we can on next week, Thursday, it might make it a lot easier for everybody because we won't have the Galvin Teachers Lounge to have a quick meeting before town meeting this time around.
Okay. So I'll work with Steve to make sure that we have something for that article, the supplemental appropriations, give you a breakout. And then, if we have to, we'll estimate a little bit high to make sure that we have enough money in the reserve fund to cover any other items we have at the end of the year.
Yeah, and again, once again, at the actual town meeting, the motion may be slightly different than what's in the booklet, and that's okay. Okay, good.
Especially
Thank
if
you.
it's less.
All right. Anything else? As long as I brought up the idea of town meeting on the 8th being at Lanigan Field, do you think that's still a possibility? Or what do you think, Steve? Where are we going at this point for town meeting?
That is kind of our thought plan right now, based on the fact that the rules from the state is that we can't have a lot of people inside. I think the best spot that we could socially distance would be Landrigan Field. We could have the presentations on the field with get a big screen projector TV thing. Have the people in the stands cordoned off. We have restrooms that we can open. We don't have to worry about the minimum number or the maximum number. That's what we're thinking right now. That's what the moderator is leaning towards. But, you know, there's a lot of questions about this, and the moderator may decide, because, you know, he likes to have a lot of power, and I think it's his call right now, that he could move town meeting as well. But I'd say we go forward with the thought that we will have town meeting on June 8th at Landrigan Field. Gives me time to get the book printed, to get it out, and what have you. So that's the thought process right now.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Anybody else got to contribute between that? Who's that?
Hey, Dan, I just moved that if we have to pre-meet before town meeting, we do it under the bleachers at Landrigan. I haven't been there since the 1994 football jamboree, so that ought to be some fun.
Yeah, they're all new bleachers now.
Luxury accommodations by contract. Yeah.
Thank you, Gerard.
Hey, Gerard, I'm going to need some Spartan garb for you, because Stoneham beat Wakefield in the overall percentage of people that filled out their census forms. So.
Oh my God. We'll spike the football on that one.
Okay.
I can give you my Letterman jacket. I'm sure.
Oh, that'd be perfect. That'd be perfect. You like half fit me, right?
All right. If nobody else has anything else, between now and next week, watch for, you know, those adjusted budgets to be voted on. And I'm going to put together my little dog and pony show as best I can. And one of the things that came out of the forecasting subcommittee is I'm going to put together some stuff that's going to talk about what ifs, worst case, most likely case, best case regarding our budgets, and looking forward, you know, moving forward beyond 2021, what things might look like. So we won't be doing a regular dog and pony show, Steve. We've been doing those for what, 12 or 14 years.
We'll have to do a virtual one, I think, a Zoom one. We can do a
Zoom one. Yeah, we could. Yeah, we'll get about as many participants as we normally do.
Probably get more.
We might.
You have
All
time
right.
to call the Jumbotron in Landrigan?
We're going to try, yeah.
Okay.
The fire department will bring extra men to bring it there for you, Doug.
Hey, maybe we can borrow the one from Dallas, the Cowboys. All right. If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn this meeting this evening.
That was Jim, I think,
Yes.
and that was Jan.
Yes.
Okay. I'm assuming everybody who's on the call is saying yes.
Aye.
And thank you all. Please stay safe. Good to see you. Look like all of you are healthy and not suffering from the virus. So take care. And I think, Steve, the only person who did not make it was Evan.
That's what I have too, as well.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for all your hard work. This is, I appreciate it. It's a difficult time. Appreciate you guys hanging in there with us. So.
All right.
Better
Good night,
times
everybody.
coming. Thank you.
Good night, Dan. Thank you.
Night.